the prospect of talking to Alex about therapy in an interview, a conventional interview setup, as beautifully shot and staged as it is, credit to our cinematographers, the reality of therapy is there's a lot more going on in the room than two people talking to each other, right? Like that's not what therapy is. If it's real therapy.
I appreciate patience in movies. I think a lot of movies, modern day movies, are too fast, just period, across the board, not just docs, all types of movies.
You can't polish a turd. Like you have to, if documentaries are really made in the edit, they also have to, I mean, of course they're also made in the shooting and they're made in the pre-production. Like it's all one thing. And I think, you know, this is a critique, honestly, of the process, you know, in this industry, is that like this like need to separate pre-production, production, post, like it's filmmaking, man.
I am very excited for today's guest. It is part of the creative duo behind the latest HBO project, Alex versus A-Rod. We have co-director Erik LeDrew and editor Kevin Barth here on Frame by Frame, where we're going to dive into the creative process for this project, how the relationship between a director and editor works. So Kevin and Erik, thank you guys so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us, Daniel.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
So I want to frame up our conversation just a little bit. So Erik and I know each other. We worked together on Russell Wilson's episode of Greatness Code many years ago, which is awesome. Erik is also a Seattle guy. He's from here, so he's tapped in with Seattle sports. And, you know, for me, that's special because I was a huge A-Rod guy growing up. Just for context, I played shortstop, was a big Mariners fan. He was one of my favorite players. And a couple of years ago, we actually took this Harvard course, The Business of Entertainment, Media, and Sports. And A-Rod was my classmate who I sat next to. You know, we go through the course. It's amazing. And at the end, he does this fireside chat with the professor, Anita Alberse, who's amazing. And he was like as vulnerable with the class as he is with the documentary. I remember sitting there being like, man, this would be like an amazing documentary one day. He admitted in front of all of us that like he cost himself the Hall of Fame, all this stuff. So it's pretty cool circle to speak with you guys on this documentary, because so much of my experience with Alex, I thought, was reflected in this documentary. So one, just kudos to you guys for, you know, this amazing piece of work. I'm sure it was a labor of love. And, you know, starting off, how does it feel to be done with this?
I mean, you know, truth be told, Kevin probably has a different answer than me because, like, I don't know if I should say this. There's a few visual effects shots that went out unfinished, and I've been like working to upload like fixes over the weekend, so I don't feel like I'm done. To be perfectly honest, you know, I'm trying to not like George Lucas and special edition it up, you know, and like go too far. But there's a few things just like, man, if we could fix it, we should, you know. So now that's, and by the way, these are the only visual effects shots in the whole thing. I should clarify, like, it's not like we have a ton of visual effects. It's like we had like one thing in a key shot that we had to like remove for like legal reasons. And so it's something like that, you know, and the work wasn't quite finished. So is what it is. But Kevin might have a different answer though. He's already like edited a whole other documentary since he left.
That's true. I mean, it's fun after working on something for 2 or 3 years to just see people react. And this one, because it has a fair amount of visibility, is really cool because you actually get to see the reactions and hear the reactions. We had a screening or two. And, so it is gratifying to hear people's thoughts, you know, because we've sort of lost perspective after 2 or 3 years. Probably.
Definitely.
And, you know, to have a little distance, for me, I've had a little distance from it. So I get to rewatch the series with fresh eyes, which is kind of cool, and appreciate what we did. So
yeah, I'm envious.
That's awesome. Well, talk to me a little bit about your guys' relationship first. How did you guys link up? Is this the first project you've done together?
No, we go pretty far back at this point. What was the first thing we did together? We did a Tom Brady documentary for Facebook Watch when that existed. When it was like a new thing too. It was like the next Netflix, you know, was the pitch. We did a Steph Curry documentary also for Facebook Watch after that, which I'll take a moment and plug it. You know, creatively, it's one of the best things I think I've done. It's like the cleanest. It was like we did everything we learned, you know, we did on the first one, Tom versus Time. we just like leveled up in terms of like skill and approach and budget too. And it's basically like a 3-hour long, you know, documentary that's broken up into like half hours, and super proud of it. But there's like nowhere you can watch it now because that platform doesn't exist, which is super sad. And then we did maybe, I don't remember how much time we had after that, but we did a feature documentary, like a legit feature for Showtime. May it rest in peace. Also can't find it anywhere, but on Russell Westbrook, another Seattle connection. The wayward Seattle Supersonic. May they rest in peace. So many RIPs here in one documentary. But we worked on that for that was during the pandemic, and that was the one, I think, when he and I really, I don't know if you would agree, Kevin, I shouldn't speak for you, but like I felt like we really like owned it creatively. We weren't just like helping, you know, augment and execute sort of an assignment that was given to us, you know, not that I think less.
There was sort of a format to the episodic stuff. Well said. And then that we had to discover what the structure and the story and the creative was. And we did. It took a year and a half of discovery. For
what did it end up being? 100 and something minutes. Like it's, you know, it was supposed to be like 90 something, and we're like just over like 102 minutes or something like that. But
But I will say that like we worked on all these sports docs, but outside of work, we just connected as sort of film lovers and friends. We're both obsessed with movies, and we hang out a lot outside of work as well. And so I think that sort of shared, passion and interest for just films in general has been kind of like our primary connection outside of work.
Well,
so
nothing
that's
better
cool.
than
feeds a lot.
Nothing better than being in the trenches with your friends, and
that's what it's all about. Daniel, like I don't mean to cut you off, but I mean like literally I just want to make movies with my friends. Like that's the goal, you know? And when Kevin and I connected, we've both been, you know, kicking around, you know, the industry, trying to scratch and claw our way up to some level of creative freedom, you know? And I think we just pretty much from jump connected, you know, and I've been pretty fortunate, you know, now to have like an 8-year plus working relationship, and I've been through some fires, you know, like real fires, and,
for sure.
You know, haven't always been our best selves around each other, but we've always like, you know, hugged it out in the end, and, you know, had a beer and watched a Kubrick movie, and it's all good, you know? So, yeah.
Well, that's cool. And I think we'll get into like why that's important, especially like when you're in the thick of an edit. But then how did you guys arrive to this place with this, you know, specific, and honestly, this is a huge project.
Yeah.
I mean, Eric's started it, and then he brought me. So
yeah, well, I mean, I mean, look, we should mention here that there's a co-director, executive producer, Gotham Chopra. He's the owner of Religion of Sports, co-founder with Tom Brady and Michael Strahan. You know, and so he was like really like the initial conduit, you know? I think Alex he'd been interested in telling his story for a little while. I don't want to, you know, put too many words in his mouth. So I'll kind of, if he's shared that in the press, why he wanted to, like, I'll leave that to him. But he wanted to, he felt like he was ready to share, you know, probably more publicly some of the things that it sounds like he shared in your, you know, Harvard class with him. And at that point, you know, there was just kind of like a matchmaking game going on with like agents and reps and all that kind of thing that happens on the, you know, the sort of background of the industry. And I think Gotham had lunch with Alex during, I think, the All-Star week, summer 2022. So Kevin and I's Russell Westbrook doc had just come out a little less than a year before. I had at the same time been wrapping up work on that 10-part docuseries, Man in the Arena, the other Tom Brady project I've done. And was looking for the next thing. And so Gotham came, you know, back to the office. I was like helping develop, you know, some things for the company. And at the time I was creative director. So I just have my hands in a lot of stuff. Greatness Code is one of them, where we met. And he was just like, dude, I just met with Alex Rodriguez. And I was like, A-Rod, you know? And he was like, yeah, like, I mean, it was really interesting, this conversation we had. It's not really what you think, you know? And he started talking about sort of like his blind spots and the way he would like, I think the analogy he used with Gotham and, you know, again, I'm relaying it secondhand here, but like I have heard it subsequently plenty of times firsthand, but, you know, like on the field, he worked really hard to figure out like what his weaknesses were and his blind spots that a pitcher would attack. And then he would like just go like a bulldozer, like full speed ahead at them to improve them and turn them into strengths. And then somewhere along the way, he learned that he had all these same issues off the field, but had been completely oblivious to them. And that was like essentially the heart of the story he wanted to tell, the process of that cognitive dissonance of being able to, you know, have self-awareness in the game and have zero self-awareness off the field, and how he came to having that off the field. So that was honestly from like the very beginning, that was like baked into like his interest in sharing his story. And of course, like someone comes at you with that, you know, like it's like give it to you on a silver platter, you know, like the thematic and sort of psychological terrain, which, you know, on Kevin and I's projects in the past, like I think we've had to work really hard in some cases to unearth that material if we even succeeded at all, you know? And so to just have that like given to you from the beginning was just like, honestly, it makes you go like, well, what else is there? If you're already given that to us, you know, at day one, like where are we going to get to at day 100 or day 300, you know, or, you know, day 900 as the case might be. And so I think as soon as I heard that, and I was like, okay, there's like a psychological angle here that he is going to be able to talk about, which is the other thing that, you know, I don't know, maybe it's obvious. Maybe this sounds obvious, but I'll tell you, it was not obvious to me learning to, you know, master the craft of documentary, but like you live and die by the ability of your subjects to narrate their interior life, you know, and you can have like all the great like ideas and questions and a beautifully designed interview and a wonderfully shot edited piece. But if your subject is unable to, and they can have self-awareness and be a great, you know, person or competitor, but if they're unable to articulate like what is going on inside them with a degree of like a high degree of self-reflection, like you're dead in the water, you know? And so hearing that, you know, it was like, okay, like the terrain is very promising. And then his ability to speak to that is very promising. And so it was just like, you know, a match. And then, you know, Kevin and I, it wasn't just like, well, he's my favorite editor. He is my favorite editor. He's one of my best friends as well. But, you know, it was also more specifically than that, just knowing that the cinematic grammar that we would be, you know, want to try and experiment with. And just like, I mean, thematically, like all Kevin and I mean, we talk about many things, but, you know, our most common, I think, subject of conversation, especially in a work environment is theme and cinematic grammar, you know, and it's those, when you have those sort of two things, it's just like, there's no one else I would like trust to, you know, work on this with. Like I needed him, you know, if I was going to try and realize something this ambitious, like there's no question you can't, you know, plug in someone who, you know, no disrespect to the wonderful, you know, craft people out there, but Kevin is also a director in his own right. And I was like, I almost need like a second director in the edit, you know, like literally working on it with his hands, you know, if this is going to be, you know, a fraction of what I think it could be. So that's my side of the story. I'm not sure what Kevin's is, but that's how I arrived at the decision to do the project and bring him along.
Yeah, I think I'd heard of it. You mentioned it at some point, and then some time passed. I was probably working on another project somewhere else, but that project stuck in the back of my brain. And it was probably, as you described it, a blind spot, and this idea of a sort of psychological, more human narrative in a sports context. And it just stuck with me. And I think even at some point I reached out to you and I was like, what's happening with that A-Rod project? And I think the ball had started rolling. And then you suggested that I come in and help sort of develop the story, the pitch. I don't know if it was the pitch for HBO. It wasn't the pitch for HBO. I think you already sold it.
Let me pause you there real quick. And hopefully this won't be as one-sided, but so the reason there was so much time that Kevin was like, had to, check in with me, was because there was a very long development period. And,
totally
like that. So that was July 2022 when I had that first conversation with Alex. And I think we did a test shoot with him in like October, cut like a little sizzle. We did another shoot with him that was more of like a verite shoot, which is actually the opening scene of the whole documentary now. And then we revisited in part 3. That was the second shoot we ever did. And,
wow.
That was in like that was like Christmas Eve or something in 2022. And then we took those two things, we built a deck, all the processes that go into, pitching a project around the studios. And I think we started pitching in April of 23. And our first pitch was to HBO. That was like the North Star, for this project, a project of this complexity, the New York aspect of it, HBO being based in New York. It felt appropriate. It felt aligned, with like, frankly, the controversies around Alex and the need for like credibility, in a project like this. We knew HBO would like hold us accountable in a sense, and bring a lot of that credibility, not just from their name, but from the way they work, and there's a lot of stories I can tell to back that up, but that was the thinking. We kind of took it around to the other studios over the next few months. And then I think by the beginning of August, almost like exactly a year after the first meeting with Alex, HBO just like closed the deal. They outbid everyone else, and that was the one we wanted anyways. So it was perfect. It couldn't have been more perfect. And it was shortly after that I called him up and I was like, now we got to figure out what we're actually going to do, So, yeah.
And this was actually fairly, like, this is different than the other docs. Like, I haven't been brought in for basically pre-production, what amounts to pre-production on any of the other documentaries. But on this one, Erik called me up and I looked at the footage that they already shot for the sizzle. And then we just talked story and what he wanted some help, or I guess wanted to bounce off some ideas off me in terms of what the story would actually be. And I think the way you pitched it was, which Gotham has said before, is it's not the story of his whole life. It's the most important story of his life. And so that was like the beginning idea or conceit. And then I caught myself up with whatever research I could do, and we would just talk. I mean, honestly, we probably spent a week just talking. And then we spent a week or two mapping out what we thought the potential cinematic version of this story could be. And there was a point at which it was 2 parts, and there was a point at which it was 4 parts, and there was a point at which we got to 3 parts.
It was a 2-hour feature film at
in
first,
that process,
actually.
but
it was like, that was where the line Kevin reference came from, was like, let's skip all of the basic biopic play by play. Let's just like cut to the heart of it. Like the story you wanted to, if this was like a fictional film, what's the story you want to see in like a singular work? It's like, you want to cut to the heart of it, and, we not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but that's basically what episode 3 is that is originally what we pitched, with maybe a little bit of the end of 2. Like it would have started kind of him coming off his initial brush with PEDs in 2009, winning the World Series, and then rolling into the continued controversies and sort of downfall that, 3 ultimately dramatizes, but, there's like, I think, so that was the pitch. That was that's the most important story of his life, not the life story. And, that was in a nutshell, like the pitch. And, but this stuff all sounds good, when you say it in a room to people, and, when you write it out in a deck. I mean, I'm a writer, so like I could make things sound pretty good. I, have worked on like Nike spots in the past. That's how I came to sports initially, so like, not to toot my own horn, but like I can sell stuff, like pretty well, especially when it's like the written word. And, but I've also done enough of these projects now to realize that like there's a huge gulf between, selling an idea, a concept, and your ability to execute it. And I just felt that was why I called Kevin. I was like, dude, like, I mean, I don't want to just walk into an interview with like boilerplate questions and like figure it out, like I want to know, I want to have an idea, even if it's not exactly what it's going to be. I want to have an idea of what it could be, and a North Star, for lack of a better phrase, to shoot for. It's not like we were talking on the phone. He came, I had an office at Religion and Sports at the time. He came and sat in my office without windows for like 7, 8, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, you know, for like 2 or 3 weeks. And we just like, we read articles, we talked about movies, we talked about documentaries. We'd write note cards and throw up on the wall, you know. Maybe it sounds like it should be that way, but in my experience in this industry, it is not how it works usually, you know, like that's like reserved for movies that like, you know, that's a writer's room from television, you know, and you like get 6 writers together and you bang out an outline for the season, and then, you know, you go your separate ways and write a script and shoot it. And, you know, it turns out the way you imagined it. And that was the approach. Was I was just trying to muster as much like creative rigor and intention as possible. And it just seems so, the canvas seems so, you know, broad. I wanted some more specificity. You know, I didn't want to just trust that we could figure it out after the fact.
It was almost like writing a script in a way, or beating out a script is what I would say, but with the knowledge that it was all going to get completely changed once you went into interviews and got what you got from Alex, which it did. Like, we did end up throwing out a lot of that initial like beat story, but we used a lot of it too. So, I mean, it inspired these guys to go out and shoot, and then they went out and shot interviews, and I think I came back in a few months later.
Very first shoot was like October 12th, 2023, I think. It was when Alex was doing one of his postseason shows at Fox Studios here in LA in the MLB playoffs. And you see some of the footage in the doc. We filmed like for a day with him, just following him around, you know. And then we had a couple more shoots, just like trying to warm him up, trying to, you know, audition our sort of like vision, as it were, and see if it was going to like work. And then really it was December where we sat down and really started to like interview him with like intention and you know, I mean, a lot of questions. And Kevin, you came back again for that. Like, I think you weren't editing yet. Maybe you'd watched some of the footage. You'd probably remember better than I had that we had shot. But then I know you helped me write the interviews that we did in that December.
Oh yeah. That's true. I guess I was sort of over your shoulder via Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was very collaborative. It was very unusual, honestly, from like an editorial standpoint. The editor doesn't typically, I mean, I shouldn't say typically, maybe different directors do it different ways, but we haven't typically done it where I'm sort of over the shoulder in the interviews and helping write questions and all that stuff. Sometimes you do that later on down the line when you do a pickup interview and you give a list of questions to the directors to use, or the stuff that you really want or really need, or the stuff you're curious about. But to do it in the primary interviews and during principal photography was sort of an unusual and exciting, very intentional, obviously, as Erik said, different type of thing. And ROS was grateful enough to, or they weren't grateful enough, they were gracious enough to support her, which was really awesome.
Would you say that it paid off, like on the back end of the edit, to have you that involved in pre-production and, you know, during the interviews?
I mean, for me, definitely, because it just helps. It helps me have a story in my head and absorb the story in real time. And then I just, you know, I think it's just more of a collaboration that way. I'm not just, I still was able to have a little bit more distance from it than Erik was, I think, which is helpful for the editor. But
and then eventually that flips, you know,
I don't know, I just felt more embedded and more. Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I mean, like, I wouldn't
cool.
do it any other way, honestly. Like, I just, you know, like, documentaries are written, right? They're not, you know, it's just like a film. Like, actors don't make up their lines, you know, subjects don't just like think up their own questions. And these questions are not just like things that, you know, you rip out of Chat GPT. Like, you have to like envision a story, and you imagine what questions could prompt the next answer in a succession of in a thematic through line. Documentary, in my opinion, you know, is even much more than other types of film, is an editor's medium. And I say that with a lot of humility. It's so much, it's shaped in the edit. But I worked enough in post-production as like a story producer, a story editor, before I became a director in documentary, to know that like like you can't polish a turd. Like there has to be if documentaries are really made in the edit, they also have to, I mean, of course they're also made in the shooting and they're made in the pre-production. Like it's all one thing. And I think, this is a critique honestly of the process, in this industry, is that like this, like need to separate pre-production, production, post, like it's filmmaking, man. It's the same fucking thing. Like you're telling a story, you're using different tools at each stage. But so in my mind, like you should have the same team essentially there throughout. I mean, to show you how far we kind of took it, we brought in our composer around the same time Kevin and I convened in the writer's room, to start Ollie thinking about, themes and motifs. And I think I put like together a playlist of stuff, on Spotify. I think Kevin did as well. And we were like sharing ideas with Ollie, and like, bringing in as many people as early as possible so that there's like a shared language, a shared understanding. You have as many opportunities to be on different pages, before it matters as possible. So you can correct that, and then, and I don't know. Yeah. Just, you're building relationships, like I would not have worked on this with an editor I hadn't worked with before. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So the cinematographers I'd both worked with before, actually all three. I hadn't worked with Ayana, who shot our final day of interviews in New York. Cause Lucas and Bryant weren't available. And by that point, I was fine. And she was great anyways. She's a great artist in her own right. But like early on, I definitely felt like I gotta have like, relationships that I can lean on and people I know I can trust when I'm like distracted by whatever stressor is going on. So it is unusual, but I don't think it should be, is I guess my point, this whole process.
And that's a interesting word there, is trust in this. I think A-Rod or Alex will say he goes to a place that we haven't really seen like a ton of athletes, high-end celebrities go on film. I doubt that's happening on day one. How did you guys get to a place, where he was comfortable, sharing some of his most like vulnerable emotions and feelings for like the world to hear?
Just like time on task, sort of, I think the way I've like phrased it is, you just want like as many bites at the apple as possible, and you want to context switch as often as, you want kind of like time on task in a given situation for like the distractions to fade away in your and the subject's minds collectively, because it's a relationship, even though you only hear my voice a handful of times, which is probably still too many times in the doc. Like obviously like everything he's saying, I'm responding to, and Kevin is artfully cutting around it, and our other editor too, Sean, by the way, who edited a lot of the project as well, cutting around my voice. But, so there's like time on task in situ, and then you like want to context switch. And when you feel like you kind of rinsed out that line of questioning and your sort of like big budget interview setup. I mean, but then after that, you do interviews in the car, you do interviews, we went back to Colorado where he did his therapy, obviously in episode 3, that was, a huge, part of the whole approach was planning to do that. And, but you're essentially asking the same question over and over and over again. And you're getting bits and pieces. And each time, even if you don't use the answer, like I remember the answer. And so I can change the question to try and like get deeper, and it's not like he's being evasive. It's not necessarily like a competition. Like I'm the pitcher, he's the batter, though he's used that analogy at times, so I think that's like the general sort of like strategy, if that makes sense. It's just, and before that though, the precondition is like, they got to be willing, like the subject has to be willing to do it. And you have to agree to it. You have to talk about it openly. Like, here's what we're going to get into. And they have to, do it like knowingly, even if they don't know exactly how hard it's going to be, which he didn't. I think he would say that, he was willing to go there from the beginning. And then when kind of things get sticky, you just kind of, you back off and you just say like, look, let's take a breath. Today's not a good day. Let's try again tomorrow, but this is what we're here to do. This is what you agreed to, right? Have you changed your mind? Because if you have, we should know, and if not, today's a bad day. Let's try again tomorrow. I don't know if Kevin might have a different opinion as the one who has to edit all of that, but I'm curious what he thinks.
Well, I have a lot. My next question for Kevin was, we're in a great era for sports docs. There's a lot out there to consume. my opinion is sometimes there's like too much going on. Like I'm trying to keep up. There's like all these different things. There was obviously, this is like a big web that you cast here, but there was like this simpleness to this story that was like easy to follow. I didn't feel like there was too much going on. There wasn't cutting between like too many subjects, anything like that. I guess what's kind of your philosophy approach to that, Kevin, when it comes to the edit?
I think it's always story dependent. This had, I mean, it took us a while to clarify it. Like we edited for a while. So there's different versions that are faster and different versions that are slower, different versions where a lot more happens in episode 2 than ended up happening. And just finding that is probably the hardest part of the entire process, is finding the right musicality for the storytelling. And like we knew what themes we wanted to explore, but finding the music of it, what's the right anecdote to express this sentiment? You know, it's complicated. It just takes time and iteration. And I think we both appreciate patience in terms of storytelling. We both appreciate suspense. We both appreciate things that I think give the audience a little bit of credit in terms of figuring out what's going on. I mean, there are times when it was too talky and you have to pull it back and you make it more cinematic. There are times, and it really is just a process. I guess my opinion is I love films first. Documentaries are just a type of film. I just happen to work in, you know what I mean? So I think the goal is always to create a great film and something cinematic and something mysterious and something exciting, where it feels like you're discovering the story as you go along, where you don't say it all outright. Although part of, I guess you could say that thesis is a little bit stated up front, but it goes into places where you don't expect it to. And I think, I don't know, I appreciate patience in movies. I think a lot of movies, modern day movies, are too fast, just period, across the board, not just docs, all types of movies. And so I don't know, if it worked, I'm glad to hear that. I think it's all, at the end of the day, it's storytelling. I think we're just trying to tell a good story and the style sort of emerges. But we did have like an intention. Erik has a very like specific visual style when he goes and shoots stuff, and he puts a lot of attention towards that. So that's great to have at your disposal. But then we have tons of archive and like infinite, clips of A-Rod through the years, and just sifting through all that stuff and finding what is the best clip to put in this moment. It's just it's like brute force. You just spend a lot of time. So it's part intentional and part just process. And fortunately we had the time to, I think largely
88 edit weeks
to do it.
which is like, I get, I posted, I think that on one of my like Instagram or some shit. And, I got like texts from like, friends at other studios who are in like executive roles, like who are just like in disbelief. And I was just like, takes what it takes, man. It's what it takes. When you said the simplicity of it, like, I mean, that's like, we're not trying to make something dumb, it's not simple, and it's simple in like a clear, elegant sense,
Yes.
And so hearing 100%. You describe it as that, I mean, that's like the greatest compliment you could pay me, I think. So thank you for that. But like part of the approach there, there's two parts, but the main one that I think plays into a lot of the material I'm giving Kevin to work with is like, I'm very selective in the interviews that I do. And like Kevin said, patient. And that runs throughout the whole process. I had a quote from, I think Rodin, like on my wall of my office that was like, patience is also an exertion of energy. And it was just like a reminder to me that like, just because I'm not like rushing to do the next interview or rushing to like review the next cut doesn't mean I'm not doing the exact right thing by like waiting, giving Kevin more time, waiting until the right interview subject becomes apparent, through watching the cut. And so I prefer, this is the process I've just developed sort of accidentally. And it seems to work for Kevin too. Like we don't shoot all the interviews and then start editing. And that's like not economically favorable in the most efficient circumstances. But that goes back to my point earlier about sort of like segmenting the process into these like easily definable silos when it's really one thing. And because the interview and the edit are the script in documentary, you know, like how can I know who the right character is to include in this if I don't yet know the story, you know? There's people you can guess ahead of time. Like Kevin and I had an interview list, I'm sure, like 50 people long when we were doing our sort of like writer's room, you know, kind of like beating out the story. And then Alex's ex-wife, Cynthia, was the second interview. And so that gave...
Who, I thought she was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
It was actually a really hard interview to do because for me, just personally, I mean, because I've never met her before. I had met her. We'd shot on Thanksgiving. That's the footage you see in Alex's living room with Cynthia and their daughters in the second episode. So I had met her, actually. I take that back. And she's very nice. But I don't know if we mentioned it in the film anymore, but at one point we mentioned that she has a master's in psychology from Ohio State. And so like, as I'm trying to like talk, like it felt like I was a little bit playing chess with her because she's so like intellectually savvy, you know, with like some of the stuff that I'm maybe like being a little bit of an armchair psychologist with. And, you know, I do my research, but I'm fine. I'm a filmmaker. I'm not a therapist, right. You know? You know, so it's not like I'm not being totally cavalier with, you know, people's psychology, but obviously she's at another level, you know, when she used to be like a social worker, you know, and all that kind of thing. So anyways, those are the first two, but besides that, we didn't do any more interviews, I think, for a few months. We did a ton of interviews with Alex, and then Kevin started editing. And then from there, it was just like, you just let the story speak to you, basically. Not sound too pretentious, but like, you just listen to who he's talking about repeatedly. Who are the people he's telling stories about? Who are the names that keep coming up? And those are often the people that will be the most complementary to the story you're telling. And it's very organic. I love working that way. It's very rare. And I don't know how Kevin feels about working that way, because it means that like you're doing interviews late in the process and they can sometimes dramatically alter the edit. I really enjoy reinventing things as we go along. But I don't know if Kevin appreciates that as much. I'd be interested to see what he has to say.
Well, that's a good segue to like my next question. You know, Kevin, you can hop in on this, but you know, it's all leaving stuff on the cutting room floor, right? That's always like one of the toughest things to do as a filmmaker. I'm sure there was plenty of stuff that was left on there. How did you guys go about really making that final decision? Who stays, what gets cut, what gets moved around?
Story tells you, like the movie just tells you. You try to squeeze them in. You're like, we got this interview and it took us a lot of time, and you know, or we got these 5 interviews, and it seems like you want to use what you shot, but the story is king, and just kind of like it says that's got to go. It's like it just feels. You feel it. It's an intuitive feeling. Part of it's intellectual too, I think. Like, all right. You get to stage 1, you know, you kind of have an idea what the story is, but then you get to, you know, stage 3 and you have a much clearer picture of what the story is. And that tells you, you know, we don't need that anymore. So you throw it out and see if the thing still works. And I think that's more or less what happened, because there's a lot of interview subjects we didn't use. And hopefully the most impactful ones that tell the story that we ended up trying to tell are the ones that stayed. And so I mean, some of that was family members, some of that was teammates, some of that was people who are not his cheerleaders. Like at some point you realize we need more voices who are not Alex's cheerleaders, who are somewhat critical of Alex. And that was some of the media personalities we brought in here. You know,
you're also, you know, the part of that decision making, just because this is maybe where I have the most impact, I feel like I can talk about it, but like, you know, it's not just like you're looking for a critic. You want people who are more measured and can push back, of course, but it's not like you're looking for cheerleaders either. What I look for, how I evaluate it, is like characters who have like stories of their own to tell. I don't want, what I hate, this is something I mean, this is where taste enters into it. I mean, it's in the whole process, but like part of it for me, like I hate documentaries where like some person like that I know from something else is like randomly commenting on it as if like that should make me care more. But like, I'm not in it for like a recognizable face. I'm in it for like people, you know, who are living their lives and making tough decisions in opposition, sometimes with each other, in concert with sometimes, you know, with each other sometimes. And so like, to me, that's where like, it goes back to like people of agency who are like, you know, material, you know, characters, like not subjects who are just going to tell you, answer a few questions and you get to sprinkle that throughout, but like people who are actively impacted and impacting the story. Like that's the rubric. And if they're not doing that, we don't use the interview. It's as simple as that, you know?
That's such a great point.
And if you,
I'll just say, cause like, I mean, I just forgot cause time had passed, but to see like Mike Francesca talking, but then an interview with Alex and him together, plus Michael like Katie Couric, like they were doing life with him to some degree, not just commenting it. So
yeah, they don't start out that way.
That's exactly right. And they enter the story when that happens too. That's the other thing. Like we don't use them as a chorus of people in episode 1. They come in episode 2 when they encounter that era.
Mike Francesca, the line, he's a Shakespearean figure. I mean, for a documentary, like it's harder to get any better than that because like the highs are so high and the lows are so low. I'm curious, like, I think the title is perfect. Alex versus A-Rod. Was that something that was pretty clear off the top? Did you guys arrive to that point later? I know titles,
no,
I mean, you know, actually, as a film lover myself, the title is such a big thing.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I completely agree. Like, I'm obsessive about the title because I think it's everything. And in fact, on that note, it's partly why the episodes don't have titles. Because like, it's one film. That was even when it became sort of like 3 parts, you know, or 4 parts at one point, like it was all like, I think it was always like, these are pieces. We're going to arc them out and make them feel, we're going to end each part where it feels like you have a sense of completion. So it doesn't feel like we're just like leaving you hanging for a week, you know? So that's deliberate. There's sort of, there is a degree of self-containment, but it really is intended to be like one complete story, you know, like going to see a play and the curtain falls, you go get popcorn and, you know, a water or whatever your choice is. And then you come back, you know?
Well, as a viewer, I think it really works because I want to talk about episode 3 and, you know, as of now, the first 2 episodes are out. The finale, episode 3, comes out tonight, so you should definitely go watch it. I'm going to tap into some of it because I really want to hear with these guys what went into it. But it's a pretty, like, not a hard left turn, but it definitely veers from that kind of traditional sports bio doc that we've seen, and it really gets into kind of a psychological thriller, I would call it, and really into like Alex's deep work he'd done on himself. So it sounded like in your meetings before, that was always the intention. That wasn't a kind of creative choice you took as you uncovered more stuff. Is that correct? Or how did you kind of get to that place to bring, I thought it was just so different from a traditional sports doc. So I really liked it.
Yeah, no, that was there pretty, I couldn't tell you exactly when, but certainly once Kevin and I came together in our, you know, sort of writer's room, I think it was always the intention to, that was part of the appeal, I think, to both of us, was like to the sort of genre bending of like, you're taking what is conventionally a sports, you know, biopic, and then you're going to insert like a sort of true crime element around his like battle with Bud Selig in the league, you know, and then it's going to take a hard turn again and move into this kind of, you know, more introspective, more, I don't know if, you know, impressionistic is the right word, but that, you know, I think I threw that around a lot early on. I don't know if that's where we ended up, but, you know, like something a bit more meditative and reflective, you know, sort of off the tails of something that's a bit more of like a true crime-ish sort of procedural piece, you know? And so that was always the approach. What I would say, I'll be honest, you know, like, I mean, I didn't know if we could pull it off. Like, I was very nervous about it, to be perfectly honest. And there were some early cuts, and this is no shot at Kevin. It was more like I was taking it on myself in terms of the work I was, you know, the material I was giving him. Like, I didn't think it was working. I didn't think it was going to work, you know? And we just kept working on it and working on it and working on it. And, you know, as things get more focused, they begin to take shape. And it's kind of miraculous, honestly, when you get to the other side of it, when you get to stage 3, like Kevin was saying, how it's like, oh yeah, you kind of like lean back and you're like, I think this kind of is what we set out to do, but man, that stage 2, he skipped over stage 2 maybe for a reason, but like that's like the wilderness when you know, stage 1, if you're like excited to, you know, see your material for the first time coming together, it's like, oh, this is starting to work. But then you go into stage 2 very quickly and it's like, what are we ever going to get out of this? Like, how do we get out of this? You know, and sometime, I don't know when, it starts to cohere into stage 3, and that's when it's like, okay, this is working, you know. And I don't know if Kevin, you have an idea of when that turn happened, but
well, I mean, I will say like that was that shoot with Alex when he goes to Colorado was relatively late in the process. Intention. I mean, it's just, and like we knew we had to do it, and it would be best done, I think, in Eric's mind, like, and Gotham's, if you go to the location and you do essentially like an OTF, more of a verite style documentary sequence to kind of peel back the layers of all the therapy, because we put him in the place where he did it, and there's a different feeling to that episode because we go to the place and it's more verite and there's OTF interviews. It's not that original hero interview, most of it. Like we use some of it, but not that much of it. A lot of it's just Erik with a camera in Colorado. And so he was nervous. I remember you being super nervous about doing that, just because it was like, you were going to go through therapy with Alex, and also it's just so intimate. Like it's you with the camera for 8 hours a day or whatever the hell it was. And you were super nervous, but it's like, you just got to dive in and you'll see what happens.
I was super nervous, and you did, because it was like, it was one of those like make or break shoots, you know, like if I fucked it up, like it was going to ruin the project in my mind. Whether that's true or not, I think it probably was true. And I don't think I fucked it up, so I can say that now. But like at the time leading up to it, I was just like, it's all on me. Like, you know, and I had some support, but it was
it was Erik with a camera.
I mean, literally
with a couple of
there was
people.
like, you know, a sound operator who like, you know, just mic'd, you know, Alex up, put a lav on him and walked out of the room, you know, or stayed, you know, 50 feet away or whatever. Lindsay Shookus, who I haven't mentioned yet, but she's an executive producer on the project. She was, you know, almost like my therapist on the project. She was there for that shoot because Alex has a pre-existing friendship with her. There's a lot of trust there between them. And so she could support sort of my lines of questioning and, you know, if things got like, you know, a little, I don't know, you know, too like emotional, not necessarily in a good way, you know, like she could kind of like help steer it in a more, you know, constructive direction. And, but outside of that, it was me with a camera, you know, and I, you know, I have a background in photography, so I like shooting, but I've rarely had to shoot and sort of drive an interview. And I've never had to sort of drive plan multiple kind of like stop and talk interviews. And also like, there's like a story unfolding in front of the camera at the same time, which is him returning to visit, you know, this place that kind of like saved his life, you know? And
the most critical point in the story, really like most critical takeaway of the story is what's supposed to happen there. So it's interesting. I mean,
no pressure, you know.
Juggle.
And it was,
dude, you crushed it.
Thank you.
Basically, I think we all kind of knew that the documentary would be made or broken by this sort of part of the story, right? And I think it was intentional to take like a stylistic left turn in the third episode, and just hope that the audience goes with you, and hope that it's deep enough to merit that, you know. But it was intentional, and I'm glad it worked.
Yeah, I think visually it broke it up for me. And then, you know, to your point at the top, Alex was like willing to go there. Like if he's not willing to go there, then it's just
some dead in the water,
in the snow. Like, you know, so I think both those things together. My, you know, next kind of question is, and this is a little spoiler, so make sure you go watch the third episode. The scene that I got goosebumps with was the exchange of like the exercise, like writing to his dad. Like that to me was like, I think tied a bow on the whole thing. And like everything you went through in episode 1 kind of like links that back together. I think it was like the 40th minute of the third episode. Mm-hmm. Did you guys like consciously decide to put that there? How did that scene come together, because it was like just incredibly powerful.
Yeah, Kevin, you should talk about that.
It was incredibly compelling material, like just right off the bat. And so I think if you're going to connect what happens in the first episode to the third episode, you know, you can't do it too soon and you can't do it too late. It has to feel substantial. It has to feel like emotionally resonant. And I think it's essentially more or less a climactic moment of the film, emotionally climactic moment of the film. You could make the case that like his comeback or something is the climax.
We think of all
I
that
think
as
really
like
the climax is that.
You know, the coda, the denouement is really like once he comes back. Like it's, yes, there's like an emotional uplift, but it's supposed to be in the spirit of like, you know, a wrapping up, a catharsis kind of approach, you know. The heart of everything is that scene. And I think, I don't know. I don't think we ever thought of putting it anywhere else because it felt like you can't go back. Once you go that far emotionally and with the things that he says, like there's nothing left to say, you know? And so I think the more difficult question for us was like, if we put this at the end, do we have enough to say, you know, for the 2.5 hours before it, that will not make it, that will support it, not make it redundant, you know, not rob it of its power, but also feel substantive in their own right. It made me counterintuitive, but it was a bit more like, well, that has to come at the end, more or less, because you just can't come back from that, you know, once you go there. So then it was just like, how do we structure his character arc to build up to that in a way that's like organic and yet still revelatory, if that makes sense.
And well, that makes sense on why you felt so much pressure to deliver the Colorado scenes, because without that context too, I don't know if that scene's like as powerful. So that's cool as we weave together your creative process.
You know, the other thing I would say on that about Colorado, you know, is like part of the reason we diverged. It wasn't just like an energetic or sort of taste thing. You know, I mean, I like doing things because I like them, but I don't know if it's like anal retentiveness or discipline, maybe is what it looks like. But just like, I really don't like doing things because I want to. I want, you know, I need it to like scream at me, you know, to make a choice, to do anything different. And I think in that case, it was like, I just felt with that shoot that the story was, I mean, the thing that was screaming at me, I should say, is almost like a negative version of it, which is like, or an inverted version of it, which is like, the prospect of talking to Alex about therapy in an interview, a conventional interview setup, as beautifully shot and staged as it is, credit to our cinematographers, and me a little bit, but you know, is like, I just did not want to spend hours talking to someone about talking to someone. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I also think, so there's that at a very primal level. And then I think that what makes that fair and not just like my whim is that the reality of therapy is there's a lot more going on in the room than two people talking to each other, right? Like that's not what therapy is. If it's real therapy, there's a lot more stuff happening beneath the surface, psychically, subconsciously, whatever you want to call it, you know? And so then it's just like, well, how do we get out of that, you know? And I think pretty quickly, Alex mentioned, you know, that he had never been back to visit Colorado since Dr. David died in 2020. And is that something we'd be interested in, you know? And so as soon as that seed was kind of planted by him, and I had my issues with talking about therapy in an interview setup, it was just like, okay, that's what we should do. That's the way to do it, you know?
That's so cool. Now let's talk a little bit about, you know, I think as mentioned, we live in a world where there's like a plethora of sports docs, but I think kind of our era growing up, HBO was just really like the gold standard for sports docs. What was it like working with them? How does like notes work in this process? You know, obviously they're the studio behind it, I'm sure. That's a collaborative effort. Well, what was that like working with HBO?
I mean, kind of a dream. You know, they're the high bar, like you said. I think they still are. And honestly, even up through like our premiere last week, you know, they treated it, you know, like a classic film premiere. You know, I mean, like a screening, the DGA Theater in New York, you know, Q&A. And not that I need to hear myself speak, I really don't. But you know, it just felt like like that was emblematic of the whole process. Like they really like valued the creative process, you know? And I've worked with other places and it's no disrespect to them, because I have some great relationships at other companies, but it just, there's the respect for the creativity. And then there's also like, because like HBO knows that their name means something, so they work very hard to protect it throughout the process. And that is a very high bar that you're continually failing to meet, frankly, you know? And so it's just, you know, that's not that I needed any more pressure on the project, but like, it was like, you know, I felt that like I didn't want to disappoint them, you know, and I won't speak for Kevin because he's here, but you know, I think that was probably true for you too.
I think their notes were really good. They were always trying to push stuff creatively, not pull it back.
That's cool
which
to hear.
To me is like, you just, with any collaborator, that's the hope. And with the studio, that's a dream, honestly. So I think they were, and it's pretty great to have just another voice, just trying to get to something substantial. And I mean, you know, like I think sports docs can, because people have seen so many of them, and sometimes the producers are also the athlete and all this stuff. I mean, sometimes people have an idea that, you know, if the subject is intimately involved, that somehow the project is tainted. And I think they helped like always like push us. Not that we weren't doing that ourselves. Of course we were, but that was always their intention too. They were on the same page. So it was great. Yeah. Just push for more substantial, more creative, more compelling. They want something more than just a typical sports doc. And that's hopefully what we do.
Yeah, that was a question I had, which we kind of wrap up here is, you know, obviously it's when an athlete like that is coming to you, like the kind of editorialness of it can always, the subjectiveness can change. How did you guys, I thought you guys danced the line really well with kind of portraying him to be pretty, you know, this is kind of who he is now, what he's learned. How did you guys go about that? Obviously, I don't think A-Rod's listed as a producer on the project, which is, you know, always a great thing. So
no, he's not. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it was, you know, I've probably said this before somewhere, but like it was collaborative with him. It wasn't, he wasn't a producer, even a ghost producer. It wasn't like that. But just the places we're asking him to go, like it just required trust, you know, like it's just, it really is kind of, you know, Kevin said it jokingly, but it was kind of a bit like adopting the mantle of therapist in some regards, because you need the level of trust that sort of relationship when they're good therapists, you know, engender. And otherwise it's just, you're just not going to get very far. Like if you turn it into a combative thing, like you'll make some headlines, but you know, all due respect to 60 Minutes, you know, but like we're as great as it is, you know, and as much as we lean on 60 Minutes in the show for some storytelling, like, you know, we're trying to do something different. This is, you know, it's a bit more subjective. It's a bit much more emotional, I hope, much more cinematic, I hope. And to do that, to go that deep and that far, it just requires trust, and you have to have a relationship to have trust. So you have to hear them out. And then you have to like decide when they have issues, for instance, and then you have to like weigh that against like how can we service the, you know, the phrase everyone likes to use in the business is like, what's the note behind the note, you know? And I think what it really means is like, not what are they saying, but what do they fear, or what do they need, you know? And it is kind of like a dance in that way of like, okay, you know, we hear you, like, here's why we can't do that, you know? And so, or, you know, hey, that's a good idea. Like he's the one who suggested going to Colorado, you know, like if we had just like, we're going to tell your life story and then box you out of the process of telling that, he's not going to give us that, you know? So I think it's just, it is tough. And I understand why there's a healthy degree of skepticism around projects, you know, where the subjects are intimately involved in the process. But in this particular case, I think we were all mindful of that and worked very hard to ensure that that wasn't compromising, our creative or, I don't want to use the word journalistic, but we'll just say like, the integrity of the project. Cause I'm not a journalist, I've been a journalist, but I was a photojournalist in the military. Like I did that, like that's not what I'm doing here. So it's not out of disrespect for that, approach, but we're storytellers and we're trying to tell a really compelling, truthful story with a high degree of integrity and creativity, and that's it, full stop. So that was whatever the best way to achieve that was what we did. And in this particular case, it was in collaborating closely with the subject, at least in terms of building trust and honoring their trust. Does that make sense?
That's a perfect way to put it. Now we try to always be practical here on Frame by Frame. I want to get in with Kevin a little bit just on some of the technicalness of editing. I'm curious, like, are you a Premiere guy, Resolve? Are you a late night edit guy? You work block sessions? What does your process look like when it comes to actually editing?
I mean, for an edit that long, you can't be a late night editor the whole time. But we are late night editors some of the time, but not the whole time. I think we got into a pretty regular kind of like 9 to 5 type thing for the majority of it. But then, of course, there's crunch time. Yeah. It's 100% a marathon, and like that's the thing. So I work on this doc. We worked on Avid, which I think works much better because we have multiple editors. Right. Sean Horvath helped edit a lot of the series, and then we had Charles Little, and then Alec also did some additional editing on it. My brother is the AE, and so when you have multiple editors, I find that Avid. On a big project with a lot of footage, it just is way more stable. Doesn't have a great title tool, as we often just laugh at the Avid title tool. I don't know.
They never change it.
I hope Avid hears this. Well, they probably won't. But we used Avid, and I don't know. It's a marathon. We just. We 9 to 5 for a while, and then when you get to crunch time, you work as much as you need to work. Really, that's kind of how it works. Occasionally, you get inspired, and you just be like, I'll put 2 more, 3 more, 4 more hours in tonight because I'm just like, I get excited about something and have to try and tackle it. But really, it was just showing up every day and just making progress and chipping away because it was it was a big story. There's a lot that was left out, and finding all those things, all the different versions of it, man. Yeah, there was a lot.
Well,
a lot of time.
And what would you say, we'll start with Kevin, but advice you have for young editors out there listening that, want to work on a project like this someday? What kind of advice do you have for them?
For me, it was just take every opportunity that you can at first and try to infuse it with the passion that you have. So for me, when I started out, it was like no project was too little. And it was just invest it with your passion and what excites you. So if you don't have the greatest footage in the world, try to make it cinematic. You know what I mean? And that's what it was always for me, was try to make it cinematic. So the stupid little short videos that I did early on in my career, like branded content, all this stuff, just go at it with the approach, I'm going to make this awesome. You know what I mean? As awesome as I can possibly make it. And then slowly, I think you just kind of like work your way into more substantial projects. And that's what happened for me. Is I worked with more and more people. The other thing is relationships, collaborating with people, being a good collaborator, respecting the director. Like the director's vision, I think, comes first, and you're a part of that. And you have to serve that thing. You don't want to be in a combative relationship with your collaborators. You can be sometimes, and we have been, but we're almost like brothers at this point. So we're allowed to yell at each other occasionally. apparently. But seriously, that's sort of, you do have to have respect for that relationship. And so I think it really is, it comes down to being a good collaborator, coming at it with passion and intention and trying to make things that inspire you. You know what I mean? And I think that's what, I mean, we tried to do that with this one. It's like, there's a realization I had at a certain point. I've worked on a ton of stuff over the years, and some of it just feels like, oh, this is just work, because I also write scripts and I make movies and I want to, you know, do the Paul Thomas Anderson thing or whatever. But like, this is our body of work, and you can't, you know what I mean? Like, this is what we're doing right now. And we said that at the beginning of this project, this is our body of work. Let's make this thing a great thing that we could stand behind and be proud of. And anyway, I guess that's
what about you, Eric,
saying.
for young directors out there that want to do an Alex versus A-Rod someday?
Find an editor like Kevin. I mean, I think I would, you know, yeah, like echo everything Kevin said. You know, go the way I phrase it, like go through the door that's open. You know, I didn't set out to be a sports documentarian, and I probably won't be one. You know, my whole career. You know, like it's a phase for me, and I found that it suited, you know, my sensibilities well. And then when I met, you know, like-minded compatriots like Kevin, other people too I've been fortunate to work with, you know, it makes it a lot easier. But I think if you're a young, like aspiring director, you know, I think it's good advice to, like, if you wouldn't watch it yourself, why would you expect anyone else to watch it, you know? And I think that's tough because we all got to pay the bills, you know? And that almost, if it sounds like it contradicts my earlier piece of like, go through the door that's open, I think finding the balance between the two, take your opportunities, but you either need to transform the opportunity into one that is exciting you, if it doesn't already, or you need to be judicious. And if it's like, just because it's an open door doesn't mean you have to walk through it. You know what I mean? So like, I think it's really important to cultivate your taste and your sensibilities and your intuition. And that's really fucking hard. So you know, I promise anybody who's kind enough to have listened to us this long, if you think you've done that, you haven't. Keep doing it. You know what I mean? Like, it's a daily process. Like, every day you have to renew that. Just do, you know, I don't mean in the trite sense of like, follow your passion, follow your bliss, like Joseph Campbell said, but I think there's a deeper truth beneath it of like, I would never make anything that I wouldn't watch for myself. Like, I just wouldn't, you know? And that doesn't mean I've made things that I haven't in some way disappointed me. But like, the only way I got to the end of that was because I thought, at least at the time, that I was making something that I really believed in, you know? And I think at least in this project's case and a few of the others Kevin and I have done, like, I feel pretty good about where we landed. I certainly, you know, it's obviously up to everyone else to judge for themselves whether or not we succeeded, but I feel, you know, a lot of pride and, you know, gratitude that we got through what we did and came out the other side with something as good as it is, or at least as cohesive as it is. So I guess all of that is to say, like, just like, and by the way, like, I think part of where I was going with that train of thought is like, there were other opportunities for me to take on other projects before this or alongside it, you know, and I just didn't feel the same about them. And so I had to say, you know, no thanks to those. And I think it's not like, maybe now it sounds like a position of a luxury of choice. I promise you it's not, but it may sound like that, and I respect that. But it's more of like, it's just like, if you don't think that there is something in that, there's not something you believe in that project, even if it's just a kernel of it that you believe in, like, don't do it. It's not worth, like, this is our life. Like Kevin was saying, this is our body of work. This is our life, you know? Like, this is 3 years of our lives that this project took from us, you know, like, it needs to be worth it. I don't have too many of these left. You know what I mean? I'm not an old man yet, you know, I feel like I'm still beginning, but like, there's only you know, so many 3-year projects you get to do in a lifetime. And so everyone better be worth it, you know? And that means that there needs to be the potential that it's worth it in the beginning. And I think that's why I emphasize that, is I think we leap too much into the doing, thinking that we'll figure it out as we go. And there's a degree of that, but like, you're not going to, like I said earlier, you're not going to polish a turd, you know? Like, you need to like, there needs to be a basic like promise of something wonderful and worth your life at the onset, you know? And then of course, once you take that leap, it's up to you to make it work in the process of jumping. But and to bring that into fruition. And there's a lot of things beyond your control, especially in documentary, that can contradict that. But I think that I would really emphasize like the deep introspection on a project, why you want to do it, what you think it's going to offer to other people, what it will give you, what the making of it will give you, and what the result is really for other people. Like the end cannot justify the means in this business because it just takes too much out of you. So it has to be the process that is giving life to you, And to me, like I say all that because I never got that advice myself. And I kind of had to learn it the hard way, just too many projects that were supposed to be 6-10 weeks. I'm just going to pay the bills and I'll get back to making my stupid short films, like Kevin said. And then they go for 20 weeks because you need, and it's the work, you can't leave, because you need the work and you don't want to hurt your reputation, but it's going downhill all the while, and it would have been fine if it was only 6 weeks. But now and then you get to the end of it, it's like, there's a year of my life. And what did I just spend my life doing? Like that's like, your time is valuable, like as a human being, your time is valuable. As a creative person, like your projects are limited, like choose them wisely, and then once you choose, like give it everything you got. Like Kevin also said, like I approach this, like it was the last sports documentary I was ever going to make. It might be, it might not, it might be, I don't know. But every day I was trying to show up and express, the last thing I ever wanted to say about, sports documentaries, basically, So
well, that's a great segue to my
saying it. But
so my last question here is like kind of all that you're talking about encapsulate everything you poured into it. I'm curious to hear from both of you. Is there like maybe one specific frame or one specific moment in this doc where you're like, oh, like that's it? I know it's a huge doc, but I'm curious if there's any of those micro moments or a single frame that encapsulates all that you're talking about.
I really love the scene in the screening room. We use it in a couple places.
Yeah.
But there's something about the scene in the screening room where Alex is watching the old footage of himself that I just really love. I mean, it's part of it's visual, part of it's just he seems kind of taken back by it, and so you can kind of see something in his eyes, and I don't know if that's the be all and end all, but
something you're proud of.
Yeah, something I really love.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that was a good one.
I kind of have two answers, and I'll try to keep them brief. But in terms of like a single frame, I think I shot it, so not that there aren't better images in it, but I'm more personally connected to it. But it was it's one of the opening shots of the second episode when everyone is comparing and contrasting the two sort of personas of Alex and A-Rod. And there's a moment I shot in his hotel room in Salt Lake City. It's like 5 a.m. and I barely slept the night before. And I don't even know if the camera's working right because I'd never shot on FX6 before. And I'm like, and he's like looking through these slightly parted curtains out the window at the mountains around Salt Lake City. We're about to go fly to Colorado. And he just like took a moment. He's got his sunglasses in his hand and he just like sits there and looks out the window, and he didn't know I was filming yet. And I just like I would frame that still if I had like, if I really loved myself, and put it on my wall. Because like, just like visually, like the use of shadows and contrast is like, it's just like crack for me as a stylist, and then I shot it. And there's like a slight push in because I realized he was having a moment, and I wasn't trying to construct like an artificial camera movement. I just had an impulse to be closer to him. And so we use that as a camera movement. And I love like artful camera movement, especially like if it's handheld in like an emotionally motivated sense, not in an unmotivated sense. So as a filmmaker, I love that. And then just, sort of what's going on for him internally. I mean, I don't know. And it's mysterious in that way, and I just, as a single fleeting moment, I don't even know if it's 3 seconds long in, a 200 and something minute project, but like, to me, that was just like, that just like fires me up. I wish every shot was that electric, And that was the very first thing I was shooting in that Colorado trip, you know? So then I also remember how I felt, you know, like I felt like I was walking out on a high wire, you know, and I didn't know if I was going to fall, and to have come away with that and to not know that I had that shot until I looked at it later, you know, and I remember being like, oh man, I shot that, you know? I don't always think that highly of my work, you know? So it's special. And then I think, so that's an image. And then just in terms of like a moment to me, sort of like cinematically, like I'm not sure, you know, the master interviews that we did with Alex, the hero interviews, like Kevin called them, where they're like very artfully lit and shot and staged. I'm just very proud of them because I've never.
Yeah, they all look great.
Visually super proud. Like Lucas shot the hell out of that, you know. Haven't gotten to give Bryant a lot of props, but Bryant shot most of the project. But Lucas shot the master interviews with Alex. Yeah, our boy Bryant.
Okay.
So like it was very much like a 2-person team, you know, like it's sort of like largely Bryant's work, but then Lucas kind of set the tone at the top with those interviews. And I'm very proud of how they look aesthetically. But I also, maybe this is just for me personally, like I just remember, you know, it was the start of the project, and in a similar sense, it was like maybe less of a focused, you know, way that it would make or break the project as opposed to Colorado. But I just remember feeling like, you know, all right, here we go. I don't know whatever this is going to be, it starts today. And so I just like all of those, I hold them very closely. And it's, you know, it's not the meatiest part of the whole show, but the moment, the story he tells of reuniting with his dad at the end of episode 1, you know, I remember when that story was unfolding in real time and just feeling like, okay, like there's something truly compelling happening in front of me. And I'm kind of just like watching it unfold. And I've been fortunate to interview a lot of people, and there have been fleeting moments, but I don't know that I've ever felt as like sort of magnetically enthralled and kind of like losing my sense of self and just being enveloped by the storytelling as I did when that was happening, you know. And that was so early on. It was just like, it was just like, okay, we're going somewhere real, you know, we're going somewhere substantive, and there's going to be some, you know, magic here that I couldn't have predicted, you know? So those are my answers.
And that's a story that you don't see him talking about outside of the documentary, you know. It's one of those things that Erik and Gotham discovered in the interview, which is like, that's the gold, man. Yeah. So I second that. And I also have to reiterate what you said, Daniel, about the letter to his dad later on. I mean, it's sort of goosebumps, even for me, when I watch it still to this moment. I still get emotional because, and that's what, I mean, it's the same thing. Like that's the emotional core of the whole thing. Both of those moments.
We were very lucky that came so early.
So it's probably those.
And I felt like a lot of the pressure came from feeling like, well, now we got to deliver on that, you know, like that can't work on its own. It can't be the only thing, you know, that works. So I'm going to have to the rest of the project has to live up to that thing that we captured in the very, very beginning before this was even an HBO project, you know? So,
man.
Yeah, so stay tuned. Watch episode 3.
Man,
it's like
this was phenomenal. Thank you guys so much for your time. I know we went long, but it was amazing. Make sure you guys watch episode 3 of Alex versus A-Rod tonight. Guys, thank you so much for coming on Frame by Frame. I enjoyed it. I know our listeners did. You guys had so much insightful material, and let's do this again after the next project.
Let's do it. Thanks, Daniel.
If you want to learn more, make sure that you subscribe to my channel. And if you could rate us on the platform you're listening to, that would be a huge help to get the word out. I would really appreciate 5 stars if this conversation was helpful for you. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Frame by Frame.